Imagine this type of doomsday scenario. You wake up and your bed's overheating. You can't move because it's crunched you. You try to talk to your personal assistant like Alexa or Google, and it can't really help you either. Then, once you finally crawl out, you find out that your bank is kind of donked because you can't use Venmo or other banking services. And God forbid you're in school right now because Blackboard's also down. Well, this isn't just a doomsday scenario. This was Monday. So, this Monday, Amazon Web Services, AWS, had an outage, specifically an outage that broke their domain name system capability. And it all happened in one specific area of Virginia called USA East. I think it's USA 1 East. It's one of the
Mhm.
AWS cloud server locations. So when you think of the cloud, they're actually in buildings, believe it or not, and there are rows and rows and rows of servers. And what's DNS? What's domain name system? Well, for those of you who are not familiar, think of it like the phone book. So, as I'm sure you've heard, since most of you who are listening have heard for years now, there's these things called IP addresses. And those are really what the internet runs on, different addresses where different websites are and different services are that you pull and push information to in order to experience everything from web pages to Netflix to whatever you use. Well, people don't like to type in IP addresses. They like to type in URLs, which is www.google, www.amazon, and like. Well, how do you link the name and the URL with the IP address? That's what domain name system is all about. So imagine if all of a sudden that didn't work. And that's how you get Monday. Thank you for tuning in to Legitimate Cybersecurity. My name is Frank Downs, and I'm here with Dr. Dustin Brewer. And today we're going to discuss how this is actually a bigger concern than most people are letting on. So, Dustin, I kind of wanted to start with the fact that I look at a lot of incidents that have happened over the last year. And, whether we're talking about advanced persistent threat actors, where there's some hints that they might have taken action, or we're talking about specific targeted things where any kind of malicious actor took advantage of a situation. In this instance, Amazon said that didn't happen at all, and it was just a big old whoopsie. Well, that big old whoopsie really caused a lot of issues. And I have to say, I'm not too angry in certain areas. For example, the smart bed company, 8Pod, I do not like their business practices. They used to be able to just buy one of their beds, connect it to the internet, and use its services that came with the bed. Now, if you want to use the services that come with the bed, you have to pay a subscription. And that
Mhm.
sounds like a hellscape to me at nighttime if I've ever heard of one. So, what do you think when you hear this? And it's almost like it's a big single point of failure to realize that so much of the internet runs on one specific service and capability, that being AWS, and that being specifically this one here in the Virginia area. What does that kind of prompt inside of you? Are we to, for something that is decentralized, the internet, right? Sounds like it's pretty centralized in this instance. And should we be concerned?
Yeah, and so this goes right back to what you and I talked about on our last episode, where and you know what we've talked. This is like a recurring theme that keeps happening, where there's a new technology, something new comes out. Right now that's AI, and AI is on everybody's brain. And what we're really
It
still
was
talking
probably
about.
running the DNS. Oh, bro.
Hey, there have been. You know what? It's funny. There have been false reports that Amazon fired half of its programmers and replaced it with AI, and that's what prompted this.
I guess
That
maybe it's
has
not so
that's not
surprising.
substantiated. I looked it up and I was like, "No, that's not true. Nobody has announced that." They've integrated some AI practices into their SDLC or into their hopefully SDLC, but into their development lifecycle.
If they
And
haven't, they might now.
yeah, and so then there's some speculation there. But look, DNS. Oh, we talked about this last episode where we're still everybody's treating this like treats the newer technologies like, oh, this is a game changer. This is something new. We got to look at it from a cybersecurity perspective. What is it? And sure, there are nuances to that. However, we're still talking about the same old systems, the same old protocols that we've been using
It's
since the 70s and
still built
80s.
on the same old bones. It just
It's the
looks real
same
good.
thing. So cloud computing, when cloud computing first was kind of ideated about by Google's CEO in 2006, or first named, I guess you can say, by Google's CEO in
Yeah, when they
2006.
first started calling the cloud, even though the
Right.
cloud
We were
had
all
been
like,
floating for decades.
Right, we were all like, "Great, so servers?" And they're like, "No, no, no, this is different." They're server well, yeah, they're servers, but it's different because of the way the billing works. Okay, and now
Marketing.
there are software services and everything else that kinda go along with that. It has evolved, but it still is, I think I've said this before, one of my favorite, I think it's like a meme where, there is no cloud, it's just somebody else's computer. Yes, and here's proof of that, like this, and this is proof that kind of happened on a worldwide scale. Now, the one
And your
question
bed is
though,
connected to someone else's computer. Think about that.
yeah,
Let it set in. Your bed, if you have an 8-pod sleep bed, is connected to someone else's computer that you don't control.
that's right. And the other part to this is that you kind of alluded to this in that it was only one geographic region of the cloud that apparently went down. However, this affected everybody worldwide. How does that happen, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so now we're looking at, okay, first of all, is it? And, let's say that Amazon is doing all the right things. Yep, it most certainly was only one geographic location. However, there are so many dependencies now, right? And the US government has seen this coming. And during the Biden administration, there was an executive order released where if you were anywhere in the software supply chain for a government contract, you have to create what's called an SBOM, a software bill of materials, which lists all your dependencies and every piece of software that you're using to build your current software for the US military or the DoD or the Department of Treasury or whoever. And so then this comes in. Anybody who's ever done anything with Linux knows the term dependency hell. This was like dependency hell, but for the internet, where even if it was one library that your JavaScript or that your CSS had to pull, your website would take much longer to load because it wouldn't be able to load that, or it would load improperly, or it would load at all. And so, because we were using these old systems, because we are so reliant on each other as far as programming goes, right? So, programmatically speaking, we're reliant on these open source libraries, these closed source libraries, these other capabilities that are hosted elsewhere on the internet. Just loading a single web page, you're probably making 20 to 40 to 1,000 calls, right? To other sites. And here's something that slows it down. Here's a bottleneck because if it can't get to one of those things, guess what happens? And look, Frank, I know you've set up a pie hole before. And when
More
we
than
actually
one.
tell us about the pie hole, Frank.
Well, I'm glad you asked, Dustin. The Pi hole, for those who are not familiar, is a specific build on a microcomputer called a Raspberry Pi. It's about, I'd say, 6 inches long and 3 inches wide. And what's so great about it, besides the fact that when they first came out, I literally dragged Dustin Brewer through half of a city looking for one, and we didn't, by the way.
It was Oahu, so it was
It
fine.
was Oahu.
Beautiful
I
weather.
should have known. Anyway, what's so great about them is they are both affordable. They're about $50 each, and you can build a lot of different things on them. And so, what I've built on them is my own DNS server. Now, this DNS server has the capability to block a lot of things that you just don't want to see. That can be anything from certain key websites to certain ads. Not that I would ever ad block, because that would be just horrible, or any other kind of capabilities that you don't want to have happen on your system. The result is that your system can move a lot faster because it's making better use of the bandwidth that's provided to you. Now, the problem is when my dog gets real excited and jumps underneath my desk and disconnects the power to my Pi hole, then I suddenly can't get anywhere on the internet because I'm using DNS, I'm using URLs to get everywhere. And my URLs are, instead of going out to a big cloud provider or a server like Google or Cloudflare or any of those, it's going straight to my Raspberry Pi on my network.
So real quick, I just want to interject here. I think we figured out what happened. Your dog was running around inside of the AWS
Chewy was
server.
running around the AWS and he knocked down
You
a
are
lot
on
of
the East
stuff
Coast. You're very close to Virginia. We now
because
know what happened, everybody.
way
Frank's
to
dog.
dox me, Dustin. Way to dox me. Because for our 10 viewers, because here's the issue. I wouldn't be surprised if there's some kind of equivalent that AWS is using. Because everybody, you should kind of understand. You think things are really technical, but at the end of the day, you'll be horrified how not technical things are. You'd think there'd be great, complex security capabilities, things that make the internet run, that keep it going. Now, man, it's like two goats and a donkey, and there's a monkey that works overnight, right? Because that's what keeps things going. When Dustin says we're using old capabilities still, what's old is new is old is new. It's the same stuff. And DNS is still here. IP version 6 is still on the horizon. And we're all still kind of stuck in a hamster wheel of perpetuity. And that's what the internet runs on. And as a result, you get to pay money for these services that then you have no control over. And I think it is a bit concerning Not that you asked, but I'm going to tell you anyway. I think it's a bit concerning that we have this single point of failure because the idea of the internet when it was first made was that it was a self-healing capabilities, that if one node was taken out, people could still communicate. For those of you who are not aware, the Department of Defense, or whatever you may call it these days, first made the internet, was it the 1960s, as a as a capability to communicate in the event of nuclear war. And the whole idea was that if a certain node or cluster was suddenly radioactive, then there's the capability to automatically communicate through another connection. Now, this kind of goes against that, right? Because if everybody's automatically and by default referencing key specific singular areas, it doesn't matter if we have this quote unquote self-healing network capability because everyone's broken, everything's down. The example I'll use beyond, I'll stop picking on the smart beds, but all of a sudden Alexa wasn't working and there were several smart devices that weren't working as well. And think of all the smart devices you have in your house that are routed through Alexa. So
Mhm.
think of the infirm, think of the disabled, the people who can't really reach the light switches, for example, and have become dependent upon something like Alexa, right? Or can't really, they rely on a smart house in order to operate as a full member of society. Suddenly, these capabilities weren't there. Now, I think do I think that's concerning? Yes. Do I have an easy answer as to how to make that not happen? No, because all the answers I have, nobody's going to like, even though we used to live in a country that would take down monopolies. So I think it's really going to be something that if we don't see a change, if we don't push for a change here, it's going to just keep getting worse. And we're presenting huge, really juicy targets to our adversaries, whether they're nation states or we'll say selfish individuals.
Yeah, but I will say there was still resiliency in that
We're alive.
you and I were still working.
Yeah.
We had no issues.
Thanks,
And look, I'm not
Microsoft.
gonna say I'm not gonna say it's because we might use a different vendor for our cloud because it's not necessarily, but we do use a different vendor for our cloud, right? But that didn't even matter in this case because there might have been some dependencies that were being pulled from those other sectors. First of all, there was resiliency. I think the internet still worked pretty much. There were some, yes,
That's
there were some
correct.
downtime. There were some mass outages caused by this, and I think that speaks more to, um, how dependent we really are on each other. And not trying to get frou frou here, but like when a software programmer is programming a new web UI or something like that, and they're like, "Oh, somebody's already done most of the work for me. I can skip that and concentrate on what I need to concentrate on." And so they're pulling from these other dependencies. That's great. That's a great thing. We see it happening a little bit with vibe coding, where there's kind of this new element to it, where AI is actually kind of helping with things. If you don't know what you're doing, though, it doesn't really help. But if you know what you're doing, and you're already a programmer, and you can find out what the AI did wrong, then it's a lot better than it's not like somebody who's a programmer can just become a programmer overnight. That's not how vibe coding works.
Unless you're vibe coding it. Just kidding.
But look, I think this speaks more towards how reliant we really are on each other as far as the human element of the network goes, as far as the systems that we built on top of ourselves. And once again, kind of going back to the internet wasn't designed to be a secure communication channel. It was designed to be a communication channel that wouldn't fail, as you mentioned. We built security on top of it. We built redundancy on top of it, resiliency on top
We've
of it.
tried.
Still underneath, though, you pull the domino out from underneath, and all those other things either fall or they kind of turn to the side, which is more of what happened in this case.
So what do you
Like, I love that you mentioned IPv6 because might have solved some issues here, right? And that's another thing is that we've had that technology for we've had that standard for 30 years, 20 years, no,
at
20 or
least
30
more than
years,
20?
more than 20
We were
years.
talking about in 2005.
Yeah, and I think the standard was published way before that, and we still can't get adoption. And there's good reasons. There's some good reasons for that, specifically privacy and anonymity. But it didn't come to my mind. I'm sure there's other issues with it, but it's this interesting kind of we're still kind of reliant on the original or not the original, but TCP/IP version 4, right? Which is a direct indicator. Not that DNS wouldn't have crashed for IPv6, but I feel like there would have been something there if we just would have been a little more adoptive of what was going on here. But anyway, sorry, I digress.
You had I've got one question that I want to ask you, but then you brought up the confidentiality and the privacy element too.
Well, what do you think about that, Frank?
Well, sorry, I'm going to ask you a different question. I'm going to come back. I'm going to put a pin in that, and maybe I'll remember to come back to it later.
Yeah.
So then, what's the solution for something like this? I mean, you touched a little bit on how IPv6 could have been something that could have prevented this. How do we, in this day and age, where we're seeing more consolidation by more organizations and companies and so forth, for good and for bad, right? I know multiple instances where a company, consolidated with another company and there was better service. I also can point to many in which it didn't. But regardless, that's just the state of play today. What is the I don't see many antitrust lawsuits in the future, right? And I don't see a lot of monopoly busting coming down, at least in the next, 5 or so years. What do you think the solution is outside of that? Because these companies are here and and they are becoming the single point of failure. And we're going to be perfectly blunt here. Cybersecurity, while important, is not always the top of mind for most organizations. So, is there, from your perspective, a method through which we can prevent this writ large? I say we, as in I mean the US, I mean these companies and so forth, from happening again? Or is it just we have to accept are these just table stakes that this is going to happen sometimes? And as we move forward, just enjoy the suck as it happens?
Yeah, that's a good question. Real quick, and just to clarify, APV again wouldn't have solved the DNS issue, but
No, I know, right, but I like your
might
perspective that we might have advanced and become more civilized and included something else.
it brings the technologies that could have been into focus, right? The other problem with DNS, and I was just tinkering with it today. It's fortuitous that we're talking about it now. Well, I
A
guess we're
lot of
talking about it
people were
for a reason.
tinkering with it on Monday,
Yeah,
that's for
a
sure.
lot of people were tinkering with it this week. Look, DNS has a time to live, right? Meaning that once a record is pulled down, a computer's not going to check again until that time to live is expired, right? Or it's not going to refresh until that time to live is expired. That can be set anywhere from milliseconds to days to weeks. So if someone pulled down an incorrect DNS record and they haven't restarted the machine or they haven't, refreshed their network, they still might be having issues right now, right? And so this is something that again is meant. We talk a little bit about the pie hole. It's meant to make things quicker. It's meant to make a resolution faster. It's meant to make it easier for a human to be able to talk to a computer. There are two elements there, right? And so to solve this issue, second generation DNS is the only thing I can think of for something like this,
But
right?
what would that
Either
look
that or we
like? Is
all
it
learn IPv.
decentralized? Does everybody just keep as like, do we now say that, I mean, everyone's shoving AI in all the computers. Can they just maybe shove in some, default, regularly updated from multi-point decentralized DNS records that everyone just self-references?
Right. Well, I would say Web3 is kind of an answer to this, right? So we have there for those of you who aren't aware, there's a blockchain version of the internet. Basically, it's a little more intricate than that. There are
It's
more
super fun,
technologies.
guys.
Yeah. But it is truly like everybody's kind of got a little piece of the internet somewhere stored on their computer, and so therefore it's decentralized, right? So if one node goes down, it's okay, it's stored on another node. They just have to go find that node. It would slow things down if it had to go to that thing, but that different node. But I digress. Anyway, the point being, with Web3 technologies, or at least the idea that the Web3 is built on, there is a capability there where we're truly looking at something that's decentralized. Not Amazon owns a bunch of data centers. It's not really decentralization, is it? That's Amazon owns them. So that's not true decentralization. In a way it is, and I get that traditionally it's less centralized than, a traditional infrastructure mainframe, whatever you want to call it. But I'd say Web3 is kind of an answer to this, right? And and it's not a solid answer. It's not like, okay, well, let's all roll into Web3 today. It's not quite ready, right? We're still, we're still in the infancy of it. That's kind of it. It's the true decentralization of something. Then, as you mentioned, when we look at cybersecurity, where
Is
are we
that
at?
is that not Tor? Is that not the dark web to an extent? And I will say that concerns me a bit. And it's not a one to one, it's not apples to apples, but it might be Granny Smith to Honeycrisp. And in that you've got decentralization, there's decentralized nodes. You're reliant on other people to have those nodes, but you don't really know those people, right? And now, separately, people are getting rolled up because they just happen to have these nodes at their house. Also, don't host a Tor node at your house. Anyone listening, don't do it. It might sound like fun. You might think it might make you look cool. Sure doesn't. And you might get arrested because not everyone understands how it works. And it can really look incriminating for you.
We worked with a guy who actually applied for it, Frank. I'll have to tell you about that offline.
But is that not like what's trying to be done with Tor? And, I don't like the affiliation of the dark web necessarily there, but you do kind of have that decentralized element.
I feel like Tor is just as decentralized as like the Amazon stuff, right? Like there's a collective that still has a certain amount of power over that infrastructure. Don't know the only difference is you don't know who owns those nodes, right? I think you can go and look it up by IP address, the exit nodes and everything, but you don't know all the internal nodes and all that stuff.
And it might get
Whereas
real
Web three
uncomfortable
is
with what you find too. Because
yeah,
if you start using Tor thinking you're completely anonymous, it's almost like crypto. If you own 50% or more, odds are the person who owns the majority of the nodes can really do a number.
yep,
Hypothetically.
absolutely.
Hypothetically.
Right, right. And so I don't think Tor I don't think Tor is necessarily the answer or necessarily the model to go over. Again, I'm still kind of returning to like the blockchain Web3 stuff where again it's truly a decentralized model. It's not efficient and it costs a
Uh-uh.
lot of money, but
Going to be super
and
slow.
I should say more money than what current infrastructure costs because what it currently is out there is astronomically bleeding all the energy, all the electricity from
Is
it's
that
it's
the
surrounding
infrastructure or is
municipalities.
that just AI? Or is AI now considered infrastructure too?
I mean, again, let's break it down. What is AI? It's just
Jesus,
processes that are
Dustin.
running on computers and clouds. So yes, it's AI is part of it for sure,
I think
and
I'm
AI is sucking
infrastructure.
a lot
I'm just a
more.
node.
Yeah, AI
I'm a
is
node
sucking a
at this
lot
point,
more.
connected to the pyramids. Oh my gosh, what is that ley lines? That's where we're going to get to at this point at some point with this podcast. It's going to just it's like now let us tell you how the ley lines are run by a yeti who secretly controls the internet out of the North Pole. You may know him as Santa, but we know his true intentions. And it's just like,
That's right.
yeah, so
Actually,
make
we
it up.
probably get a lot more views that way. You should turn that into a little snippet.
Yeah, you know what? If I'll just one of these upcoming podcasts will just be some crazy rantings, and it'll be like, "There's no proof ghosts weren't at the signing of the Declaration of Independence." Let's talk about the haunting of Thomas Jefferson. Anyway, I think it's really interesting that you bring that point up because I like the idea of crypto and I like the idea of blockchain, but I have found that as popular as crypto's become, blockchain has not really gained that much popularity. Why do you think that is? Is it just because it really isn't a sexy topic, but I do think it's something that could really improve a lot of lives. Why do you think, though, that it just hasn't gathered enough steam?
There's a couple of reasons. And number one, I think it's too expensive. We're basically seeing the rebirth of the internet, but the people in charge already have the marketing of subscription behind them in between their ears. So they're
Yeah,
sitting there going like, how are we automatically going to monetize off of this? Oh, I know, we're going to charge for absolutely freaking everything.
yeah,
And
not
so
enough
me
money to
like a
make.
dummy, I actually do have like a Web3 address. I paid probably like $100 for it or something like that. I don't remember how much it was. And I don't even know where it's stored, and I probably lost the keys for it. So who the hell knows where it's sitting now? But back in my
The shadow
futurist
knows.
years, yeah, that's right. Back in my futurist years, I used to have that. So I think money is number one. I think there still is this belief of blockchain being a gimmick, which is so funny because the market cap on block. I know that crypto kind of crashed a little bit over the past week or so, but still, we're talking about multi-billion-dollar industry, right? So you can believe it. It's a niche market all you want, or that it's vaporware or whatever, but it's worth something, literally.
It is worth something.
And then it is one of those things too, where it was such a simplistic idea. And when you break it down to its core components, AI for everything that we say about it, it's an incredibly complex system that's built upon other complex systems. You can break it down to its more simple systems, but it still is something that's very complex. Blockchain is something that is so almost stupidly complex that it's like, why didn't and some people are like, well, we did have it in some form or another. It's like, yeah, kind of, but Satoshi Nakamoto really is the one who like brought it all to light and then made it something where it was like, this is a sustainable decentralized capability that we can track currency at the beginning, and now it's kind of track everything, right? And it is just such a simple thing that I think when that happens in the IT world, people get upset and jealous, maybe a little bit, where they're like, "Oh, I could have thought of that."
Everyone says that. If you have a good idea, first of all, and somebody hears it and it is a good idea, you'll know you have a good idea if someone just starts talking trash to you, being like, "Oh, it's not really that big of a deal." It's not.
Right.
Then if someone says that, then you've actually come up with a good idea. Run with it.
And
But
that's probably what happened with Satoshi Nakamoto, and he was like, "I'm gonna publish this anonymously," and
there
then
was a
just see what
huge
happens.
cash out from one of like what they think was his wallets. I want to say it was either this month or last month. Dude didn't even run a test transaction. Not
He
one.
doesn't care.
Just
Yeah.
not he didn't even try to test it, just ran with it. Has the wallet's not been active in like, 15 years and just he just boom. Sorry, you kind of distracted me a bit because now I have this just terrible idea of creating on the infrastructure a bunch of bots and we've convinced them and they're all AIs and we've convinced them they're ghosts. I just don't know what that would do on the internet. Think of it, decentralized AI bots online that think they're ghosts. How would they act?
Hey, there are some. We should actually do an episode on like Ghost in the Machine.
Yeah,
There's a couple of
it
really
is
neat.
spooky season.
It
Whoa,
is that's right.
for
Oh, hey,
Halloween.
there we
Why have we
go.
not done this yet?
There you go, guys. Halloween, too, guys and gals. Halloween, tune in. We're going to be doing a special. We'll talk about what is it, Polybius, the secret CIA game to try to recruit people.
Well, they just found the answer to it. Oh, well, the CIA code, that's on the statue out there that no one's ever been able to solve.
Did somebody figure it out?
No, they just found the answer in the archives. The dude who made it wrote down the answer, and it was like in the National Archives or something. They're like, "Oh, check this out."
That works. I like it. Okay. Okay.
Which at this point, it better be absurd. There better be like no real rhyme or reason to it, because if you got the smartest people in the world, all of them right there within like a 50-mile radius, and no one could figure it out, I think you're just being asinine at that point, or
I was
you're a
about to
time
say at
traveler.
CIA headquarters. I think you're thinking of the other
I
headquarters.
said
Those
within
folks.
50 miles, Dustin,
You
so I
said within
hedged my
50
bets.
miles. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. See,
You clarified.
big brain there. Big brain.
Now
I
a bunch
didn't
of
say the
now a bunch of
most narcissistic people. I said the
yeah.
smartest people within
And
50
now the
miles.
CIA is going to come knocking on our door
Again,
again.
again.
That's right. And
Any,
ICE, Frank.
yeah.
You just
Hey,
keep getting harassed.
hey, they got a bigger budget now. Just let's leave it at that. And that's a story for another episode. So until then, thank you everyone for tuning in for this, sudden shock blitz. We wanted to put this out while everything was still fresh. We'll have another episode maybe for you later this week or next week. But until then, we still don't have a slogan to say at the end because no one's given us any ideas. But we'll talk to you later in the week or next week. Have a great time. See you then.